Thank you. Order, order. I will call Gregory Stafford to move the motion, and I will then call the Minister to respond. Remind other members that they may only make a speech with the prior permission from the member in charge of the debate and the Minister. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as is the convention for 30-minute debate. Order, order. Gregory Stafford to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr Dowd. I beg to move that this House has considered the impact of taxation on small and medium-sized enterprises. It is a pleasure, as always, to serve under your chairmanship, Mr Dowd, and I'm grateful to colleagues for attending this morning's debate. Small and medium-sized enterprises are the backbone of our economy. They create jobs, sustain local communities, and keep our high streets alive. Yet since the 2024 autumn budget, they have been met with higher taxes, higher costs, and a government that appears indifferent to whether they survive at all. Mr Dowd, it is almost impossible to know where to start with this debate, given the government's complete failure on the economy and its sustained neglect of business and enterprise. The Prime Minister speaks the language of growth, but lacks the backbone to take the decisions needed to achieve it. If this debate was simply an exercise in cataloguing failure, we would be here all day. Instead, I want to focus on the real-world consequences of this incompetence for the small and medium-sized businesses that keep our economy moving. In my constituency, I hear the same message repeatedly from business owners: staffing pressures, soaring energy bills, and rising financial costs, which, in many cases, have more than trebled as a direct result of decisions taken by this government. And this is not anecdote, Mr Dowd, it is reflected clearly in the data. Research from Zero shows just how precarious the situation has become. 2 in 5 SMEs do not even know whether they were profitable last month. That is not confidence, that is business flying blind. Since the 2024 budget, Labour has made a deliberate political choice to increase the burden on retail, hospitality and leisure. These are not marginal sectors, they are the lifeblood of our town centres, major employers and key drivers of local economic activity.
On that point, will my honourable friend give way?
Very happy to give way.
Thank you. Last week I was lucky enough to host a round table with some SMEs from Bromley, including the excellent Martin from the Crown and Anchor. They said to me that this government's policies are restricting their ability to grow, including hiring young people and the jobs tax. Would my honourable friend agree with me that abolishing business rates will give small businesses the boost they need to thrive?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that, and I agree with him entirely. Like him, I've held round tables with hospitality, and businesses are saying the same thing, that what they want to see is a cut in business rates, and the Conservative pledge to entirely scrap business rates for those businesses under £110,000 is the right step and will be welcomed by business. It's something that I really hope the Minister will take up. Good ideas should be taken by this government, but they seem to find a problem with doing that. And my honourable friend mentions that, and it reminds me that in the Labour Party manifesto, Mr Dowd, which I'm sure you read clearly yourself, they pledged, and I quote, "Labour will replace the business rate system so they can raise the same revenue but in a fairer way." Well, that clearly hasn't happened because businesses are being hammered. I will.
I'm grateful to the honourable member securing this debate. I had a business rate summit in my constituency last week, and it came over that in York we're seeing a 35% average increase in business rates compared to the national 19.4%. So there is a geographical element to this too. Does he agree with me that we do need to revise the whole system, not least because things like a profit-related tax or turnover tax could bring in more revenue, but also cost those small businesses far less?
I thank the honourable lady for her intervention. I hope the Minister is listening, that this is a problem not just in constituencies in the south, but across the country. And this isn't just Conservative or Labour or Lib Dem or opposition members of Parliament raising this issue. Clearly, members of the Labour Party have this same problem. Now, I think the Minister should look at all good ideas, but clearly, currently, the Treasury orthodoxy is to carry on with what it's doing, to tax anything that looks like enterprise, anything that looks like business, anything that looks like job creation, and that will destroy our economy and harm our high streets. I'll give way to the honourable member.
Can I commend the honourable member for Farham and Borden for bringing this forward? He's absolutely right to underline this story, just to reinforce the issue. The Chancellor and the Finance Minister in Northern Ireland have rightly rolled back on the impact on tourism through the enhanced taxation that have been proposed. However, this feels more like a stay of execution than a solution. So it's happening everywhere, not just in England and Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland to a great degree. Does the Honourable Member not agree that a number of small uplifts in terms of rates, national insurance contributions, price of goods, etc., can no longer be absorbed by the knife-edge profit margins, that unless we stop these tax rises, and that's government's responsibility, our local economy will pay a deadly price?
And I thank the honourable member again, as always, bringing his experience from Northern Ireland, and it just goes to emphasise the point I was making prior to this, that this is a whole country problem. And he is absolutely right that we are at a knife edge. We are at an absolute tipping point for our small and medium-sized enterprises. And if they go under, the consequences will be dire. And if you want to speak Treasury speak, it means the Treasury will actually raise less money. The only way that the Treasury is going to raise more money is by freeing businesses up to expand, to grow, to employ more people. That is the way we get our economy going, not by taxing every single business until the pips squeak. Yeah. Now, Mr Dowd, I want to move on to hospitality in particular, because this has been a focus of mine since I was elected. It underpins community life and provides work for young people and those who rely on flexible hours. Yet, the government slashed retail, hospitality and leisure relief from 75% to 40%, an ideological and damaging decision, followed by eye-watering increases in rateable values from April of this year. Now, UK hospitality data shows that the average pub will see its business rates rise by 15% in the first year, climbing to a 76% increase by year 3. At the same time, online and out-of-town competitors are being protected. Distribution warehouses used by online giants will see increases of just 9% in year 1 and 16% by year 3. This isn't a level playing field. It's actively tilting it against the high street. The government's so-called emergency pubs relief announced this year does little to address the scale of the problem. It is a sticking plaster, not a solution. Just 1 in 20 retail, hospitality and leisure businesses will benefit. And even then, the average pub will still be paying £5,700 more in business rates than before. Business rates are simply not being reduced. And these pressures are compounded by changes to employer national insurance contributions introduced at the 2024 budget. For the hospitality sector alone, this amounts to £1 billion every single year. More than 774,000 hospitality workers have been dragged into employer national insurance for the first time, disproportionately affecting part-time staff, such as bar workers and waiting staff. Flexible work is being punished, young workers are being hit hardest, and employing people is becoming more expensive at precisely the wrong moment. This is not pro-growth, and it is not pro-work. VAT policy has also failed small businesses. The £90,000 VAT registration thresholds actively discourages growth and creates perverse incentives for firms to cap expansion. The government has ignored repeated calls for a reduced 12.5% VAT rate for hospitality, a policy that would support growth, improve competitiveness and align the UK with many of our European neighbours. The refusal to act is holding back an entire sector. The PPS is chuntering from the PPS seat. I'm sure he will be able to hold his own debate at some point and tell us all what's going on in his constituency. I suspect if he was honest with this chamber, he would be telling them the impact that his government's policies have had on the sector and how it's absolutely destroying his high street like it's destroying mine. These pressures are not theoretical. They're being felt by real businesses across my constituency. One example, Mr Dowd. At Birdie's Cafe in Farnham Park, business rates have increased by 550%, from £290 to £1,600 a month, a change that has already cost the business a member of staff. Energy bills have risen from £300 to £400 a month to £3,500 a month, while rising wage costs and changes to employment law have forced the owner into rolling 3-month contracts, a worse outcome for workers driven entirely by this government's pressure and policies. At the Bat and Ball pub, business rates are doubling from £800 to £1,600 a month, and minimum wage changes have added £56,000 a year to their wage bill. And across my constituency, from the Antiques Warehouse, the Pack House, the Bluebell Pub, Serena's, the Six Bells, the Healy Pub Group and Hamilton's in Farnham, to Acorn's Coffee House, the Old Dairy and Isaiah's in Borden, Oliver's Cafe and Wine Bar and David's Menswear in Hazelmere, Small World IT in Parsfield Stores in Parsfield, Little Latte in Tilford, the General Wine Company in Stedman Blower in Liphook, and the Greta Inn in Gretham. These are all community businesses that have written to me or spoken to me facing the same relentless squeeze from government tax and regulatory decisions. These are not failing businesses. They are community anchors being priced out by this government's policies. These issues are not confined to hospitality, Mr Dowd. Yesterday I met with Medicines UK to discuss the impact of government policy on suppliers of generic medicines. They raised serious concerns about the extended producer responsibility packaging tax. Packaging, obviously, is mandated by the MHRA for safety reasons, leaving companies with little ability to reduce their tax liability. As a result, costs are either absorbed or passed directly onto the NHS and therefore the taxpayer.
Will my honourable friend give way on that point?
I will do.
I know he's talking specifically about businesses and enterprises, but on that last point, these decisions that are taken by the government are also impacting charitable institutions as well. Indeed, I've met some in my constituency of Bromley and Biggin Hill who are having to let charitable staff go and therefore having a further impact on the NHS.
My honourable friend from Bromley and Biggin Hill is absolutely right. And one of the perverse outcomes of the many tax implications that this government has put on is that whilst the NHS is exempt from some of these tax rises, rightly so, those who operate out around the NHS, for example, care homes, hospices and other charitable institutions are being hit. Even GP surgeries are being hit. This is the nonsense of what we see from this government. It is, I'm afraid, people taking policy off the shelf from Treasury civil servants without really understanding the real-world impact that it's having on businesses, on the charitable sector, and, in general, our constituents. And as my honourable friend alludes to, in effect, this is a tax on the NHS by another name. This obviously sits alongside the VPAG levy, which takes 10 to 35% of NHS sales from manufacturers, and taken together, the government is heavily taxing life-saving medicines, often at higher rates than comparable systems overseas, with clear implications for supply and sustainability. Now, Mr Dowd, in my November debate on alcohol duty, which I'm sure you've read in detail from Hansard, I was disappointed by the Exchequer Secretary's dismissal of the impact of tax rises on hospitality. But since October 2024, 90,000 hospitality jobs have disappeared. If that many jobs were gone from a car plant or an oil refinery, this House would be in uproar. But because it's pubs and cafes, ministers look the other way. That is a scandal. I therefore urge Treasury... Yes, I will.
The Scottish Affairs Committee has just done a study of, or doing a study of High Street, the viability of high streets. We had a professor from Glasgow University who specialised in the subject, and he made an extraordinarily convincing case that basically Amazon is being subsidised by the high street, and Amazon being hugely undertaxed and the high street being overtaxed. And I wonder if you would support me in getting the Minister to look into that subject and the cost of whether they're actually killing our high street. Thank you.
I think the honourable gentleman makes an interesting point that what would be fairer would be see some equity between the online providers and the retailers who are physically on the high street and have to pay things like business rates. I can see the Minister has heard his point, and I'm sure that he will respond to it. Whether the honourable member will get the answer he wants, I'm less certain of. But going back to the point that I was making, Mr Dowd, because it is pubs and cafes, ministers look the other way, and that is a scandal. I therefore urge Treasury ministers to review the cumulative burden placed on small and medium-sized enterprises through tax and regulation. Any response today will be taken directly to the hospitality roundtable I am hosting this Friday with publicans, restaurateurs and cafe owners. And I will return to where I began, Mr Dowd. The Prime Minister talks about growth, but refuses to show the backbone required to deliver it. The government's failure on business and enterprise is not abstract. It is written into higher taxes, lost jobs and boarded up high streets. If ministers continue to ignore this, we really could spend all day listing the consequences. With the spending review now replaced by an OBR forecast, the government has 8 or maybe 9 months before the next autumn budget. I urge them to use that time wisely. Boost businesses, not blight it. Support SMEs, don't punish them. Because when local businesses fail, Communities pay the price.
Yeah. Well done.
The question is that this House has considered the impact of taxation on small and medium-sized enterprises. Minister.
Mr Dowd, it is a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and I'm grateful to the honourable member, the member for Farnham and Borden, for securing this debate. I believe it's the second debate of his that I've had the pleasure of responding to here, and I look forward to many more in the time that I'm in my role as Exchequer Secretary. I am grateful too for his contribution, and I'm sure the businesses in his constituency will be grateful for the representation that he brings to this place on their behalf. It sounds like he has a fantastic set of small and medium-sized enterprises in his constituency. On the broader point of the impact of this government on the economy, I must say, Mr Chairman, that I believe the member for Farnham and Borden was being too downbeat and too gloomy, because we have seen 6 interest rates cuts since this government took office because of the stability that we've brought back. That's bringing down borrowing costs for businesses, and it's bringing down the cost of living, or improving the cost of living for families up and down the country. Hundreds, if not thousands, of extra pounds in the bank account rather than going on their mortgage. We've seen economic growth increase. We outperformed the forecast by the OBR by 50% last year. And we've seen wages increase across the economy faster in the first year of this government than we did in the first 10 years under the Conservatives, and higher wages and better living standards for people in our communities, in his constituency and in mine, mean that there's more money to spend in the shops and on the high street to support our high streets. The member opposite raised a whole range of policies, and I would just gently say that some of the policies he mentioned were implemented by his government. So the extended producer responsibility for packaging, for example, was, I believe, a Michael Gove initiative. And I think the Labour Party in opposition learnt the lessons of rubbishing the record of a previous Labour government, and once we stopped doing that, we found ourselves re-elected because people put their trust in us. I would gently suggest that Conservatives are careful what they wish for when they criticise policies that the Conservative government itself introduced. Mr Chairman, this debate follows 2 budgets when, yes, the government did have to ask both businesses and individuals to contribute more to support our public services, but we did all we could, particularly in the last budget, which I was closely involved in the Treasury, to keep the contribution we were asking as low as possible, by pursuing fair reforms to our tax system that are long overdue, which I'm happy to go through in detail, but I won't for time, and it's slightly off topic. But those changes that we made did allow us to make sure that we were able to provide support to businesses, for example, in the business rate system. And the main ask of the public, for example, was that we were keeping income tax thresholds frozen at the end of the decade for a further 3 years, in addition to the 7 the Conservatives did so. And I do want to just say that small and medium-sized enterprises, this government does back them and does value them. They're at the heart of so many communities. I'm sure they're at the heart of your constituency, Mr Chairman, and all of those in this room. We value them. We value their contribution, the hard work and the graft that the people who set them up, grow them, try and expand to multiple premises, try and hire more people. The work that they do is fantastic and really valued, and so vital as well to the culture and the life and the vibrancy of our high streets and our communities. And sometimes some of these small businesses can be the only business in a village or a rural community, whether that be a pub, a post office or a cafe, and we know just how important they are to rural and coastal communities too. Of course.
I've spent a great deal of my life looking at small businesses, and there are 4.1 million sole traders or self-employed people in the UK. That £90,000 VAT restriction is basically, it's a block on building businesses. If it was increased to, say, 250, and 10% of the employed people, that'd be 400,000 youngsters in work. The modelling that I have done will show that the HMRC will get a lot more money, and I'm delighted to go through it with you. So if you want some real growth from the micro organisations in the UK, I would really appreciate a chance to meet you to discuss this.
We do have one of the highest VAT thresholds among large economies in Europe. And of course, the government keeps all tax policies, thresholds, rates, etc. Under review. And I would be interested in the analysis that he's carried out, though my understanding here is that if we were to significantly increase the threshold, it wouldn't be revenue generating, but would in fact cost revenue for the Exchequer. And this goes to a point that the member who brought the debate raised as well. He suggested at one point that we should almost halve the rate of VAT for some businesses. And I would just suggest here that the challenge and the trade-offs that you have to grapple with in government are not grappled with by those who want to see such significant cuts to VAT, because we do have to make sure we maintain the revenue to fund the NHS in his constituency, to fund the local councils to fill in the potholes, to make sure we provide the social care that we need for constituents, and really significant... I'm happy to give way again.
So I met ICAEW this morning. I'm meeting FSB. We have done all the modelling. I can assure you that our numbers are being checked out by all the experts. So I do think that the government might be missing a trick on this one.
I'm, of course, always happy to receive representations from members from all sides of the House, and I look out for some correspondence for him too in my very large weekend correspondence box that I always enjoy on a Sunday evening. I'm happy to give.
I'm grateful. It might not have filtered through, but I have written to the Chancellor on behalf of many MPs on our benches about concerns about small businesses and the fact that many of them will not receive the vital support that they need and are very fearful of what's going to happen in just 8 weeks' time. Will he ensure that he looks particularly at small businesses who aren't getting the relief and the support that they need, and ensure that we are able to mitigate some of that, because these businesses form a vital part in our kind of economy ecosystem for the whole of business, and if they're not growing and if they're shrinking back, then that's going to have an impact on our whole economy.
I thank my honourable friend for her question and for her engagement and the representation that she provides in this place for the small businesses in her constituency. It's a wonderful part of the world. And if my team haven't been in touch already today, I'm hoping that we can find time to meet next week for a conversation, because I know that this issue is one that's really important to her. York is a fantastic and vibrant and growing part of our economy, and so I expect some of what's happening here is that the businesses in her constituency have seen their values increase by more than others in parts of the country that haven't been doing as well. But that's why the government has provided a whole range of support for business. But I look forward to talking about that with her in the coming days. How are we doing for time, Mr. Chairman? We're fast running out. Let me turn to the topic of business rates, because this has been raised by members in the debate today. And it's worth noting that we are implementing significant reforms to the system. So on the point around large online retailers, throughout the whole history of the business rate system, as far as I'm aware, and including under the 14 years under the previous government, the multiplier, otherwise known as the tax rate, within the system for your large online giants was exactly the same as the tax rate paid by a typical business, by the multiplier paid by a typical business on the high street. And as part of our commitments in our manifesto to reforming the business rate system, we've introduced a really significant wedge into the system now. So the large online giants and their warehouses, their multiplier is 33% higher than the multiplier for a business on the high street. Now, I'm aware, and we've had lots of conversations in this place, that reform, that significant underlying reform to the business rate system has happened, Mr. Chairman, at the same time as the revaluations since the pandemic have come into place and the same time that the government has chosen to slowly and with significant transitional reliefs unwind the temporary pandemic support. This was raised by the member for Farnham and Borden. And the challenge here is that the previous government, when they stood for office, the OBR forecasts as they were set out didn't earmark any funding whatsoever for continued support within the business rate system for our high street. If they'd have stuck with those plans, they say now that they wouldn't have, but if they had stuck with those plans, which are what they presented to the country, then the relief would have ended overnight in 2025. We extended the relief by a year at a lower rate, and now, rather than ending it overnight, we've introduced significant transitional relief. So many of the businesses in his constituency will see their increases, if they are experiencing them, capped at 15%. Overall, across the system as a whole, more than half of businesses are either seeing their bills flat falling or within their staying at 0 too. And this tax change, this 33% wedge that's been introduced to the system, in effect that's an almost £1 billion transfer in business rate liabilities away from the high street and towards the largest businesses with properties worth £500,000 or more. And this transfer will benefit 750,000 smaller properties on our high streets. When it comes to pubs, which have been mentioned in the debate so far, we did see 7,000 pubs close over the last 14 years between 2010 and 2024, and I'm aware that pubs and all of hospitality did experience challenges, particularly in 2022 when inflation surged to 11%, when energy costs went up, and to be clear, that was in large part a result of Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine and the impact on the global economy. But we did see inflation rise significantly. That impacted individuals in their bank balances, but the government understands that times are tough for businesses on the high street, in part because of that legacy. The member who brought the debate today did mention some statistics for pubs, which are now out of date because of the change that was introduced last year. The 76% increase is not going to be happening anymore. In fact, 3/4 of pubs and live music venues and those who are affected by the changes that were announced last week will see their business rates fall or stay the same this year, 3/4, and then they'll be frozen for 2 years. And the crucial thing here, just on the point about whether it delays it or not, the crucial thing is that we're launching a review in the methodology that's used to assess pubs. I'm sure this will have come up in the member for York's roundtable with her business on business rates and the engagement members are doing with businesses in their constituency. But pubs are valued in a relatively distinct way. Their takings are used to assess their value rather than their floor space. That can be quite opaque for pubs. It can also mean that if they see their business rates increase as a result of higher takings, but really that's just reflecting underlying increases in higher costs, that they can feel like they're running to stand still. So we're going to look closely at the methodology used to value pubs and hotels too, and I hope we can get to a permanent long-term solution at the time for the next revaluation that will come in place in 2029 as planned. And briefly on the point around the increase from 800 to 1,600, again I would urge him to check with that pub whether or not, I assume it will, but each business is different and I shouldn't comment on individual businesses precisely, but the 15% relief is probably applied there too now, so it shouldn't be a further £800 increase. I note, of course, that it is an increase for that business as he sets out. We're also publishing, Mr. Chairman, a high streets strategy. We're going to be working on that in the coming months. That's going to be a cross-government effort, yes, with the Treasury involved, but also departments like MHLG, the Home Office, so we can support businesses who are struggling from shoplifting, and working with Department for Business and Trade and MHCLG as well. I hope that I've responded to a range of points that are made in the debate. I thank members for their contributions today. And of course, in the coming months, in my role as Exchequer Secretary, I will continue to engage with businesses, small and large, on the important points that have been raised today, to see what more the government can do to support them as they seek to grow, to support employment in their communities and to support the life and vibrancy of our high streets and town centres.
Very much. Can I assure the honourable gentleman I do read his parliamentary contributions assiduously, side by side with the Labour manifesto. So there. Thank you. The question is that this House has considered the impact of taxation on small and medium enterprises. As many as of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. The sitting is suspended until 2:30 p.m. Thank you.